The opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of our sponsors and are only those of the individual commentators. Viewer discretion is advised.
Good evening and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Elliott Raben, and with me is just part of my expert panel, just Christina. How are you, Christina?
I'm good. I feel very empty without my second half, but I'll manage.
Well, you better manage because, we don't really have a choice, unfortunately. As I mentioned, Anna is away as a precaution, getting COVID tested, and of course, we want to make sure that she is healthy, and hopefully she'll be tuning into the show from home, so she'll be in the comments, so maybe we'll be able to read some of her words. And joining the show as a returning guest is Hannah Salamon-Vegh. Hannah, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be back.
Of course. So can you tell our audiences a little about yourself? Just remind them who you are.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, I've been on the Raben Report before. It was an honor. I am completing my Bachelor in Music Research at Western University. I'm also the president of the Pro-Life Club at my campus, and I'm involved politically as well and with various politicians and political movements. And I'm a panelist twice a month on Tanya Granicalen's show Counterpoint on the News Forum.
That's awesome. So you've obviously got quite a portfolio, very busy and all. So thank you for coming back on the show. It's going to be a good discussion. And before we move on to our weekly update, I wanted to mention something that I didn't get a chance to on our last show. Last week, we had a discussion about activism today, and we were so grateful to have Kevin on the show. It's people like Kevin and Hannah and all the guests that we've had on the show that I believe are true advocates for change. If your entire persona is to post on social media, but when invited to have a conversation about important issues, you refuse, you're not an activist. You're a lactivist. You're a joke. And the reason I bring this up is because it really does bother me. The whole point of this show, and I think I've said this many times during the season, is to have important conversations. Whether you agree with what our main panel, or our guests, or even with what I have to say, the fact that you listen, comment, or even come on the show, that's activism. That's the spirit of someone who really wants to advocate for change and wants to create a positive impact on this world. Just food for thought. Well, that was the first time, I guess, Raben rant segment, but, we'll see. We'll see what happens in the future.
Adding these.
Sorry?
Every now and then we should start adding like a little 30-second
Raben rant?
Raben rant.
Interesting. I've thought about it, That's actually how this show started. It started in high school with a little idea, and it was basically like a John Oliver type program where I ranted about something. It was about telemarketing, and that's from a former telemarketer. So anyway, coming up in 15 minutes, we'll be talking about our main topic, which is conspiracy theories. But first, let's take a look at our top stories, starting with the coronavirus update. Of course, we got to talk about the elephant in the room. Anna's not in the room, so we put an elephant in the room, which is the coronavirus pandemic. The Ford government has put Ontario into a state of emergency for 4 weeks. They've shut down non-essential retail again to curbside. They've banned the sale of non-essential items, which includes, specifically in Dollarama, school, office crafts, linens, clothing, kitchen, novelties, candles, toys, seasonal, home decor, glassware, closet, bathroom, jewelry, hair accessories, artificial flowers, books, greeting cards, gift tags, souvenirs, and party supplies. Gyms and personal care stores are still closed and have been closed for over 300 days. So what do you guys think about that? Christine, I'm going to start with you because you made a very good point on a previous program where you said that essential means different things to different people. So I saw your face while I was reading off that list. What are you thinking?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is like, since when were school supplies and office supplies not essential? People are still working and kids are still or if they're not going to school, they're at home learning, or they're going to be after their break. So how is that not essential? But also, what else does Dollarama sell except for everything you just listed?
That's a
like what would be the point of them being open when they can't sell anything?
I mean, if you want some prepackaged cookies or some Sour Patches, the
Sour Patch
Straps.
Kids are definitely more of an essential over bathroom, whatever, the bathroom aisle, the home aisle, definitely.
What shocks me is the clothing. How is clothing not essential?
I was just going to say, and the other thing that we have to keep in mind is Dollarama is like a very... a lot of people from low-income families use Dollarama because they have everything that you need, all the essentials for no more than $4.
Yeah.
So clothing, essential. And if a low-income family can get clothing at Dollarama for less than $4, how is that? I don't understand how that's not essential. And I think the biggest thing for me is that this is a store and a service that like a whole community relies on, and they're just wiping it out. You can't get like all those things you listed, not all of them, maybe not souvenirs or gift tags, but a lot of that stuff sounds like essential to me. Bathroom goods, home goods, maybe
kitchenware,
clothing, whatever it is.
Hannah, how do you respond to these new measures?
Well, I think they're completely unscientific. So if I go to Walmart and I go to buy a pair of shoes, which I can't now, if I were able to buy those pair of shoes, I would get COVID, right? And then if I go pick up groceries in the same store, then I'm not going to get COVID. It's completely unscientific. I mean, some people say, well, Hannah, you should be thankful that those places of the store are blocked off because it's going to help lessen the blow on the small businesses who can't be open right now. There are plenty of small businesses that sell groceries too, and they can't be open. So first of all, it's completely unscientific. And second of all, the government doesn't have the right to tell someone whether their business is essential or not, or whether what they need is essential or not, or whether they and their livelihood is essential or not.
Well, that's a good point. So obviously we all agree here between Christina, Hannah, myself, and Anna that essential means different things to different people. And here's we're going to go back into the Raben rant section, which is you want people to work at home, but you can't buy office supplies. You want people to eat at home, but you can't buy cooking stuff. You want to entertain your kids and go outside, but you can't buy a basketball or a bike for them. So what are people supposed to do?
Push back.
Push back? Well, we know you've pushed back. You've attended a lot of anti-lockdown, anti-mask rallies. And why?
Because I think, going back to my earlier point, the government has completely exceeded its power. The government has the power to do certain things, to keep people safe to a certain extent, to keep us, safe from foreign invaders, that type of thing. But they don't have the right to dictate every single aspect of our life. And they've gone too far. And it started with 2 weeks to slow the spread. And now we're in indefinite lockdowns while much of the world is reopening, going completely back to normal. And we're in our third lockdown here with even stricter measures. And it was interesting when I was coming here, like the highway was packed, and during the first lockdown it was scarcely a vehicle out there. So the main thing is people just have to live their life as normal as much as possible. I know some people can't because their businesses shut down. I think they should reopen, and the government is only as powerful as the people let it be, because they can try to push and try to control every aspect of our lives, but ultimately they answer to us. They get our power from us, and we have to tell them enough is enough. Interesting.
Christina?
I just a comment came through, and I'm so sorry because I don't know how to pronounce this name. Vithushin?
Yeah, Vithushin.
Okay. So they say, I feel like closing off all these sections, you're forcing people to be crammed into tighter spaces, which is another good point, because if the whole point is that we're supposed to social distance, how are all these closed aisles going to help with that? You're now forcing all the people that would have come in before. Has capacity changed?
I don't think the capacity limits are the same.
Okay, so from what I understand, capacity limits are the same, but now there's all these aisles that are closed off. So now the same capacity has to cram into a smaller space, which is a really good point. Like,
so proponents of this measure would say that by doing this, you limit the amount of people that go in the store, because if they can't buy a certain item, then they're less likely to go to the store. But what are the ramifications of that?
I mean, for so many people, I mean, like depression is skyrocketing, suicidal attempts. Even with the schools being shut down again, like 300 doctors wrote Doug Ford and Stephen Lecce and said that this is very harmful for children. We cannot continue doing this. So I think the government is just building their pit deeper and deeper for themselves. And the more they exceed their role and responsibility, the more people are going to push back and never trust them again. So even though I hate all these measures, I think in the end, it's going to have some good effects, because many people are going to realize that, you know, you can't take your rights and freedoms for granted. And if you do, this is where we end up in, because it starts as something little, and it starts as, you know, if you care for your neighbor, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. Well, I don't think lockdowns are very caring for vulnerable people in particular.
Well, do you consider what you're doing and what other people are doing in regards to attending these lockdown protests as a rebellion? Or, as Roman Baber, who was on the show, said, it's a discussion?
Well, I mean, it could be both. I mean, one of the rallies that I was at in Brantford a couple of weeks ago, there were about 2,000 people there. And these are just perfectly normal people who have lived their lives normally before this and just want to be able to live their lives normally again, because we know that lockdowns don't work. It was months ago the WHO said stop doing lockdowns. They're extremely harmful, especially to vulnerable and low-income people. And I guess our government hasn't got the message yet.
You would agree?
yeah, I mean, like I personally, you know, I'm not attending these rallies, and I think that lockdowns to some extent do serve a purpose. I think obviously what we've seen recently is that these lockdowns are doing shit all. So I don't think that our recent measures have worked, but I do think that the idea behind the lockdown, like protecting vulnerable communities, there's a reason we're doing it. I'm not going to I'm not going to protest wearing a mask. I'm personally more comfortable wearing a mask. I have severe asthma. If I end up in the hospital, I'm probably going to be on a ventilator. So there's certain things that, while I don't think that anything that within recent time, the measures that have been taken have been very effective, I think we need to take a different route. I do think that there's the idea somewhat is there. It's just not being executed properly.
Well, we have a comment from Matt that says, this is the Great Reset. It's intended to make Amazon, Costco, and other corporate giants even bigger. They are all in cahoots. Prove me wrong. Well, we're going to talk more about that in our main topic of conspiracy theories, because cahoots, that sounds like a conspiracy, but is it? We'll find out. But let's move on to our next item of business. Unfortunately, Prince Philip has died at 99, 2 months shy of his 100th birthday. Thoughts, Hannah?
Oh, I definitely feel very bad for the Queen. This is definitely a very, very difficult time for her after being married for so many years. And I think their love story and their commitment to each other for their whole life was very inspirational to a lot of people. So I know a lot of people are mourning with her and her loss.
Christina?
Yeah, I agree. I think I said in a previous episode I never cared too much for the royal family.
Yeah, when we were talking about Marco.
Yeah, so I think, however, despite that, a death, no matter what, is always going to be tragic. It's sad, and I do feel for the Queen. He's been around for... the fact that somebody can make it to 100, basically...
Well, yeah, I mean, some interesting facts about him and the Queen. They met when she was 13 and he was 18 and married 8 years later. They were actually third cousins, but at that time, I guess everyone was, marrying between royal families and doing that. But he was a good friend and lover of Canada, actually, having visited 20 times with the Queen and another 46 times alone. He is the royal with the most visits to Canada. He quit the royal duties in 2017 while still obviously being a member of the royal family, and he was a big advocate for peace and the early environmental causes. And, a lot of people look up to, like you both said, him and the Queen had a very long marriage, and throughout everything, throughout the loss of Diana and her mother, Prince Philip has been there for the Queen, and this is one of the largest yet longest standing institutions that give people a sense of comfort. So it's quite sad, obviously, and we're going to see how this plays out in the era of COVID. He didn't want a big funeral. He didn't want a state funeral. So I guess this worked out in his favor. And finally, let's talk about the co-founder of BLM buying a mansion. So Patrice Kahn-Kullers, the leader of Black Lives Matter and a self-described Marxist, recently purchased a $1.4 million home in an exclusive Los Angeles neighborhood where 88% of residents are white and 1.8% black, according to the census. She has now also purchased 3 more properties, totaling $3 million altogether. Black Lives Matter, which began as a hashtag in response to the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the 2012 shooting of Trayvon Martin, took in more than $90 million last year and was the forefront of protests across the country last year and after the death of George Floyd in May. And now there's another protest going on after the death of another black man at the hands of police. So she's a self-described Marxist, which advocates for the abolition of personal property. Then, if that's the case, why did she buy not 1, but now 4 properties?
Can I just weigh in here? I find it hilarious how so many Marxists, socialists, they argue for this life that they want to live, but they can't live it themselves. Like, you're advocating for Marxism, yet you're owning millions of dollars worth of property. Like, I'd like to know where the correlation is. Like, you can't, I don't, I'm trying to think of another example, but
and here's the thing,
practice what you preach, I guess. Yeah,
and here's the thing, you do support the BLM movement.
I 100% support the BLM movement. And I think it's kind of sad that, the leader of this has now profited off of it so much, considering, I think it's about a lot more than money, obviously. But I just find it funny that she would preach
and not follow through.
Yeah, she says that she doesn't believe in personal property yet.
Mm-hmm. Hannah?
Yeah, I agree. It's pretty crazy, especially in the socialist, communist, Marxist camps of people. If you look at how they live, I mean, Bernie Sanders is another example of someone who has tremendous wealth, but then he's preaching wealth redistribution and stuff like that, and that, people shouldn't be allowed to own much. We've seen throughout history people who, generally speaking, the majority of people who are leaders in these types of movements, the life that they live is nothing compared to the life they think other people should live. And recently on one of my Instagram stories, I posted a picture of what it looks like under socialism. All the people over here in trash heaps, basically, like we see in Cuba, and then all of the leaders are in their gated communities far off in their palaces. I am not against people owning stuff. I think people should be able to work hard, to be able to work honestly for their money, be able to have big homes, whatever, be able to travel, all of that. But you can't do that on the backs of other people, especially for movements like this. There are many aspects of the Black Lives Matter movement that I disagree with. I think that Black lives do matter and every human life matters, but it's especially low, I think, when, it seems like the leaders are profiting over this movement. And there's previously another guy, Black Lives Matter activist, who actually he was arrested, I think, for using that money for personal gains and buying houses and other stuff like that as well. But Candace Owens.
Yeah, there was another one who was arrested for trafficking.
Yeah, I think that was him. Yeah, so Candace Owens said that this Black Lives Matter leader is truly living out what most Marxists do. So, and I completely agree with that. But last year, the BLM movement raked in $90 million, and there are a lot of the BLM chapters who have formed together. They're called the hashtag BLM10, and they are advocating for BLM, like the overarching organization, to give them the money that they promised them, because the majority of the chapters have not received any of the money to make their communities better. And this is in contrast to Blexit, Candace Owens and Brandon Tatum's movement in the States, which is actually making a difference in the Black community for good.
Wow. Christina, you very much dislike Candace Owens, but do you agree with her on this point?
Well, okay, so this is the thing. That's a lot of money. I think that that money could and should be serving an important part in this movement. These chapters should have this money. This money should be going elsewhere. Things like bail funds. I mean, depending on the crime you commit, a lot of people at protests. I do think that some of them are unfairly arrested. And I think that, a lot of people, at least in the height of BLM over the past summer, a lot of money was being raised for their bail funds. I think that this money can be redistributed and be used as it's intended.
To actually help Black communities.
Yeah. This is money that they need, that these chapters need, that these communities need. Withholding that or not being fair about the distribution of that money, I don't agree with that. So I guess I would agree with Candace O in that sense, but I don't agree with Blexit.
Well, and another thing is with this BLM leader, if she truly believes that white people are so harmful and dangerous, why would she be wanting to live in majority all white neighborhoods here? That seems pretty hypocritical.
Well, that is a good point in terms of why is she living in such a predominantly white neighborhood if she is advocating for Black people and white people to be treated equally. And I think that everyone here agrees that everyone should be treated equally. But that ends our weekly update portion of the show. Let's move on to our main topic, which is conspiracy theories. Oh, is a delay there? No problem. According to the Oxford Dictionary, a conspiracy theory is the belief that a secret but powerful organization is responsible for an event. Throughout history, there have been many conspiracy theories that have taken the world by storm. From the death of Princess Diana to the 9/11 terrorist attacks, many people are skeptical of the reported events and how they actually came to fruition. Was Diana's death an accident or a murder? Were the terrorist attacks on 9/11 by a terrorist organization named Al-Qaeda or a government plot to invade the Middle East? Today, with the power and access to the World Wide Web that technology has brought us, these theories and many others have been able to spread farther and faster than ever before. But why is that? Why do these theories exist and why do people believe them? Are they right? Do they know something we don't? Or is it a bunch of malarkey? These questions hold greater meaning with the COVID-19 pandemic. Many are skeptical that the virus was purely accidental. Now, with the vaccine rollout, more questions have arisen from what's in the vaccine to vaccine passports. Tonight, with our guest Hannah, our panel takes a look at these questions and more about conspiracy theories as a whole and with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as always, we are live on Facebook, so make sure to comment on our feed to have your thoughts read live on air. We know Anna will be commenting. So, ladies, let's start. What is a conspiracy theory to you? Christina?
I mean, I think the definition you gave is pretty clear. It's that's what it means to me. It's an in the words of what's her name, Kellyanne Conway, alternative facts. I think that's what a conspiracy kind of is, right? I think that they exist because of the people who are, willing to be free thinkers, and they try to think outside the box and come up with, and sometimes these conspiracy theories actually end up being true. We'll get into it more, but they're conspiracies, but some of these have ended up, the theory was actually true.
Like?
The Dead Baby Project.
What's that?
It was, I can't remember the entirely, all the facts surrounding it, but it was basically people thought that the government and medical workers were stealing fetuses and using them for experiments. And then what ended up coming out was that they were using parts of the fetuses, not the whole thing. But
so it was based in truth.
It was based in truth. So, to some extent, that's a conspiracy theory that was not entirely wrong.
Hannah, what's a conspiracy theory to you?
Well, there's the Oxford Dictionary definition, or any dictionary definition, which I agree with, and that's accurate. And then there's the way people generally use the term conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorist in our modern context here. So basically, it's kind of thrown around like the term "you're a conspiracy theorist." That's thrown around and labeled on people who think for themselves and think anything that's outside the mainstream narrative or what the mainstream media says. So I would say that it's often misapplied nowadays, and that it just muddies the water. And then you have things that are not conspiracy theories, and what I would say could be conspiracy theories all put in one basket, and then it gets rather confusing.
So how do you differentiate a conspiracy theory from the truth?
If it's in line with reality and if there is evidence and facts to back it up. Because I mean, even with our, COVID-19 context here, a few months ago, even when there was many things that people were talking about, including like this, what we were told was like a leak from a member of the Liberal Committee about all the plans that our government had for the lockdowns and when things were going to happen. And when I first saw it, I'm like, well, I have no idea if it's true. I hope it's not true. I hope to God it's not true. But then everything has happened according to, it was laid out on that plan, and we're in the third lockdown now, and we continue onwards. So when things are floating around like that, we have to see if they play out. And many people were called conspiracy theorists when there was talk about possibly these COVID camps. They happened. When people were talking about the Great Reset, Justin Trudeau called them conspiracy theorists, but then he went and spoke at the Great Reset conference. So we just have to see if those things play out, and then the facts either disprove or prove them.
Well, okay, that was a very concise answer. Obviously no discussion there, but why do people believe in these conspiracy theories? Obviously, for like you both said, it could lead to the truth. But how does it come about, and why do people start to believe these potentially truthful beliefs?
I think if there's even a shred of evidence that it could be different than what we're being told, I think people have a tendency to latch onto that, or at least some people, and they want to know more, right? I've never been big on conspiracy theories, and majority of them I do not believe, but I've gone down the rabbit hole of YouTube, and I can see where people get lost in these things and really start to believe them, like Pizzagate. Or
what was Pizzagate for our viewers who don't know?
I have to pull up the whole story because I don't want to butcher it. It's basically it started with this pizza place, and in the back of the pizza place, or the basement of the pizza place, there was child sex trafficking. Let's come back to me. I'll pull up an actual explanation.
Do you want
it?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So the whole Pizzagate thing, I don't even know how many years ago people were thinking this was true, but it all goes back to the QAnon and the 4chan website, which is a load of crap. But people who follow this website, who think it's military, U.S. military intelligence, which it's not, they thought that people were giving clues that some children were being trafficked in the back of this pizza place. And then this guy, I think he went to go rescue them, and he may have shot some people. I don't 100% know all the details. But that's an example of people who are believing nonsense. And obviously human trafficking does exist, so go out and fight it. Don't believe these things and basically sit on your computer all day long dwelling in all this garbage, because there's so much evil and bad stuff in this world. That's the reality. So get off your laptop and do something to make the world a better place.
Yeah, definitely. The Pizzagate one for me, it was with one that I just I don't believe it, but it's the curiosity of, or I was very curious about. There are documentaries on YouTube that are 3 hours long, and they're not talking about the same thing over and over again. They've got all these theories and evidence. So, I think people latch on to anything that, we're told one thing, and then if there's anything that strays from that, people, will look into it.
So you said that you're interested in it. What are some conspiracy theories other than COVID related that you both either believe in or are curious about? Christina?
This is hard. So like I just said, I got super into the Pizzagate one just out of curiosity. Some of it's so ridiculous. Another one that, I can't say that I believe any conspiracy theories, at least ones that have been proven, sure, but I don't believe in any current conspiracy theories. So when I'm listing these off, this is just my curiosity and interest in the kind of the communities that look into these things. The whole Bush did 9/11.
Princess Diana. Now,
okay, so that's one. Okay, that might be the one where I'm on the fence about it, because I don't how could we know? Because things like this happen all the time. High profile people being, murder for hire, that type of thing. It could have very easily been all set up, but that's never been proven.
Well, you heard it here first. Christina thinks that the Queen killed Diana with her bare hands. Hannah, what are some conspiracy theories that you believe in or are curious about?
Well, I mean, I don't call myself a conspiracy theorist. I know some people think I am or may have called me that, but I just try to research and figure out different things. And I've looked at the 9/11 stuff to kind of, see what happened. Bad things happen all the time, and so much I do believe is covered up. We don't know all the stuff that's going on in this world, and I don't want to know all the stuff that's going on in this world. Even if we look historically at World War I and World War II, for an example, there was so much stuff going on, like so much deception for good or for bad. There are people who are double agents. We'll probably never know all of the stuff that happened, and it was so complex, and there was so much stuff going on. So we know many of those things happened where people were double agents or they were doing this and that for whatever side. And I like learning about that. And I have read a book about a spy who was trying to, gain a better sense of what was going on in the Bilderberg group and stuff like that. And some of those things, I mean, I hope it's not true, but maybe it is. And at the end of the day, I like to think for myself, but I don't like to go down these rabbit holes because they're pretty morose. When it comes to like vaccines or COVID or stuff like that, some people could call me a conspiracy theorist because I have issues with the vaccine, or I think that there's great reset stuff going on or whatever, but that's just me thinking for myself. And there are many other people who think the same as well.
And we'll come back to COVID because it's a large portion of our discussion. But, one of the conspiracies that Anna wanted to talk about was that Trudeau's father is not actually Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and she believes that it's Fidel Castro. Now, when you put the images side by side, you can't deny that they do look very similar. Do you both believe that? Okay, you're...
I'm sorry. It's so... I laugh about it because the idea of it in my head, whether it were true or not, it just makes me laugh for some reason.
But you laugh because you believe it?
No, I don't believe it, but if it were ever proven true, like, I would find it hilarious. I don't know why. The idea that Fidel Castro over in Cuba is the father of, French-Canadian Justin Trudeau. Yeah, I don't know. I don't believe it, but I think it's interesting. And sure, the photos look alike, but a lot of...
Should we get him on Maury and get him a DNA test?
I think that's a great idea. I also, a lot of people look alike, so who knows, right? I do think that Fidel Castro is he was, in terms of appearance, much more you can see him and he looks Latino to some extent. He was white, but he doesn't look like Trudeau. But that's
interesting.
Another conversation.
Hannah, do you think that Fidel Castro is actually Justin Trudeau's dad?
I have no idea. I mean, maybe we'll eventually know one day, but I think people who are trying to figure that out are wasting their time. They should be more focused on the fact that Justin Trudeau has said that he likes the basic dictatorship of China, and he was very good friends with the Castro family. So we see a lot of that type of, communist socialist stuff here. So you should deal with that instead of trying to figure out who his father is.
Well, to push back on that, like with Pizzagate and like with other theories, the only way to find out the answer is to push on those beliefs.
I mean, the only way is if he would do a DNA test. If it was accurate, but then how do we know if it's accurate and if it's actually his DNA test? So those are the things that go on forever.
Right. The only thing, I will say, if he takes it to Maury, it will be done ethically. The results will be 100% true. I trust Maury. I do.
You do?
I trust him.
Okay.
So I think that's a good idea. I'll get in touch.
Okay, well, we'll be starting a petition on change.org if you'd like to sign it. Justin Trudeau, please appear on the Maury Povich program. Now, obviously, people have the right to believe what they want to believe, but oftentimes people are told to stop believing that. So how does censorship affect conspiracy theories?
Censorship and cancel culture has a huge role to play in conspiracy theories because, a very simple analogy is you have a child and you tell them to not go touch the jar that's on the counter. Well, the first thing they're going to do is go over and touch the jar on the counter and find out what's in there. So we've seen that like with Parler being shut down, people were leaving Facebook and Instagram. That was becoming a competitor to big tech. People went over there, Parler was shut down. And so many videos are taken down about, COVID related stuff, vaccine things, so many things. If you don't like an idea, if it's not true, debate it. I happen to know a couple of people who are very big into the, 4chan QAnon stuff. And it's pretty disturbing, but I've challenged them like big time on it and said, show me the facts, like prove it to me, like where are you getting this stuff from? And one of them, he's like, well, Hannah, I've gone from like, I think something like the fact stage to the belief stage. And I'm like, dude, you still got to be using your brain. You can't just be merely believing things, through faith. So challenge those people, challenge them to debates. Don't censor things. That's only going to make things worse. And I feel like we're going back to the medieval ages in many ways, that anybody who thinks outside of, the Catholic Church or whatever, or the government nowadays, off with your head or whatever, basically. That's a very, very harmful way for us to move forward as a society.
Well, we did have an episode on cancel culture, and Christina, do you agree with Hannah's statements on that?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and we talked about this in our cancel culture episode. I do think that cancel culture, for the most part, does more harm than good. It's about tearing people down. If somebody doesn't think the way that, the majority of the population thinks, they're canceled. And I don't think that's fair. I think in certain circumstances, people need to be held accountable. But I definitely think that in the context of conspiracy theories and cancel culture, we shouldn't be canceling people based on their theories, right? Unless it's harming somebody. Which most of the time it is not.
And back to you, Hannah, and both of you actually, in terms of always asking questions, we have a comment from Matt that says, always ask who is telling the story, who is writing the story. They have the power in the narrative that they are creating. And it's one thing for me to tell a story, and another if someone famous or has a sense of prestige in their community telling a story. Who are they going to believe? So that's, I guess, alluding to celebrities or people in power putting forth beliefs or their truths. So we should always be questioning. Should we never take anything at face value?
Well, it's a balance, because in some of my university classes, I see like some of my classmates, they don't want to believe anything. Like they are critical and they're on their high horse about everything. There's a difference between being, thinking critically and being arrogant and know-it-all, right? That can go either way. So we have to, be thinking things through critically, doing our own research, and that can be hard sometimes when so many articles are pulled down or videos are pulled down. We're not able to do our own research. But yes, it's completely true that a lot of celebrities hold a lot of sway in people's minds, and I think in our school system, and even if it's not in our school system, people got to learn themselves how to think critically, how to evaluate things, and how to think for themselves, and not be part of this groupthink mob.
Well, speaking of groupthink mob, these groups have come about because of the internet. A lot of people believe these theories because they spread so quickly. And why is it that these theories spread so fast? Why is it so easily picked up? Like, even there's a lot of jokes about it, but like a lot of people will get messages on WhatsApp and they'll believe right away, especially the older generation. So how and why does this spread so quickly, and why are people so quick to believe it?
I think people are quick to believe anything, whether it's the truth or not, right? Like we think about any information that we're presented, anything. People take it at face value. So I don't see why that wouldn't be the case when, someone who has a lot of free time is going down a Facebook rabbit hole and they start to read into something. I wouldn't be surprised if they started to take that stuff at face value, right? Like people believe what they read.
You go back to people on the internet like Alex Jones, who says, and now he's banned from Facebook. You can't find him there. You can't find him on other platforms. I was curious for the show, so I was looking for him. And one of his theories is that they're turning the frogs gay.
That's my favorite theory of his. I tell my coworkers about that theory.
What is the theory? And how are the frogs becoming gay?
That there's something being put in the water that is turning the frogs gay. and the frogs are now homosexual because of what's in the water. And I don't know if it ties into humans, like maybe, if you drink the water, you'll turn gay. I don't know exactly what he thinks. Even if they were putting something in the water that's turning the frogs gay, does it affect us?
I don't know if it affects us, but okay.
I don't know.
Hannah, what do you think about that?
I've not heard that conspiracy theory.
Really?
No.
It's so you after the show look into it because it's the most ridiculous Alex Jones conspiracy out there.
So again, going back to that, Alex Jones putting forth this belief of his, banning him from Facebook, doesn't that give more credibility to him?
It does in many ways. And even with all the Facebook and Instagram fact checkers and all that type of stuff, or when I want to repost from like a more independent news source, like, the Post Millennial or True North or anything COVID related, if the article has something COVID related in there, they'll always be like, are you sure you want to repost this? I'm like, yeah. And you're not my parent, by the way. Okay. And so much of big tech and the government is treating us like children, and it's coddling people's brains and closing their brains, like that book, Alan Bloom's book, The Closing of the American Mind. So I think it's in some ways making people more susceptible to these types of things because they've not been taught to think critically and to be able to look at everything on the table, because these things are put off, and then it draws more people over there to, I would say, what looks like a dumb theory like that. And it also puts other things in that camp that aren't dumb when, people are questioning things about, like I said, the vaccine or the lockdowns.
Well, that takes us to the COVID-19 portion of the discussion. A lot of people have a lot of different beliefs about the pandemic. Mainly, do you believe that the COVID-19 pandemic was a government-made event? And before we hear from our lovely ladies in studio, we asked our audience that question. And
Yes,
Christina, what were the results?
So the results were, of everyone that voted, 37% said yes and 63% said no, which
Out of how many votes?
It was...
It's about 53?
About 53. Just under 52.
Okay.
So compared to our other polls, I wouldn't say this one's close, but it did surprise me that 37% said yes. I think that that's relatively high for, that's not something that I realized so many people thought.
And you didn't do your Reddit poll this time, did you?
I didn't, and I should have, but...
Next time.
Yeah.
Next time you will.
Yeah.
It's okay. So since we're talking to you, what do you think? Do you believe that the COVID-19 pandemic was a government-made event?
No.
No?
No.
Hannah?
I have no idea. So that's why I wish your sticker there had 3 options. One, I don't know, because I reply back, I don't know. But all that matters is how, I think what matters more is how we are responding to it and looking at how it's being capitalized on by a lot of world leaders.
We'll take that up with Instagram because they only offer 2 options. So
Right.
We'll be writing a stern letter to Instagram and to Justin Trudeau and to Maury, obviously, and to the Queen, because Christina thinks she killed Diana. But let's talk about it then. If you're curious and you're inquisitive about the pandemic, what exactly is leading you in this path that makes you question the truth about this pandemic?
Well, the quote that says, never waste a good crisis. And so at the beginning, like I mentioned when I was talking last time here, talking about COVID-19, the lockdowns, at the beginning, most of us were okay with lockdown. It made sense. We had no idea what was going on. And then as more and more data start coming out, and then how like the WHO condemned lockdowns, it's like, why are we still doing this? And also when the virus came out of China, and then China used that as an opportunity to crush the Hong Kong uprising. It's like, well, that's very convenient. And we've seen the amount of, if you want to talk about police brutality, the police brutality that we've seen, like crushing, protests and church services, and it continues to go on like that. And it's not proportionate anymore or anything like that. And if you are paying attention to like what Justin Trudeau and Patty Cajou and Chrystia Freeland are doing, like last summer, right after COVID started, they were speaking at the World Economic Forum's Great Reset Conference. That was online, and Professor Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, and he's also involved with the Great Reset Forum, and he wrote a book called COVID-19, The Great Reset. On the Great Reset website of the World Economic Forum, the first quote you will see is from Klaus Schwab: "The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. And I had heard about his book, COVID-19, The Great Reset, and I was looking at some of it today. It's rather bone-chilling what they have planned in there in terms of tracking people indefinitely. And he talks about once these tracking measures are in place, there'll be no incentive to get rid of them, so that we know where people are all the time, using COVID as an opportunity to bring that stuff in, just like a lot of the security measures that came in after 9/11, but then have that continue to try to control the world population. And another thing he said COVID-19 has made government important again, and acute crises contribute to boosting the power of the state. It has always been the case, and there is no reason why it should be different with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Do you think that this book is like a 2021 version of 1984?
In many ways, and it's interesting because many people think that, these people are like really closed, behind the closed doors stuff that they're saying. Well, obviously, yes, but this is very public. You can buy the book for $13 off of Amazon. And I don't know how he had time to write that book back in June. It was June 2020. He had it out. That was 4 months after COVID happened. I would, it would seem more normal if he was writing it now, but it was out, soon. It'll be a year ago, and kind of laying out their plan to capitalize on this opportunity.
Do you believe, Christina, do you believe in this Great Reset, and do you believe in the same theories that government is planning to track us and so forth, and that's their ultimate goal?
I mean, I hate that idea. I don't think I even want to allow myself to think about it. So I admit that there's a bit of denial there. It's probably me saying they would never do that because I don't want them to. And I admit that. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of things, like the fact that how many crimes are solved because of your phone tracking, somebody's phone tracking them or pinging to a cell tower. It's, we're already kind of being tracked to some extent. Yeah. So I think the idea of it being taken up a notch and somebody knowing where I am at all times, I hate that. And so I am in denial a little bit about that because I don't want it to be true. But in terms of the pandemic, I don't think the pandemic was planned to be used as a reset. I think that it was just an opportunity, if anything. So I don't think that they planned for this to happen, but then I think once the opportunity presented itself, it was an opportunity to, what was the quote that you first shared? It was never waste.
Yeah, never waste a crisis.
Yeah. So, I mean, a crisis arises, you realize that you can gain some kind of control over things. And I think that there's people who did take advantage of that. I just don't think that it was planned.
Well, to play devil's advocate, because that's my job here, a lot of people would say that we are already so tracked by the government, and they really have all the information because we've given it to them in regards to social media, in regards to our phones. They have tracking is always on unless you disable it. The microphones are always working, so when you talk about a product or an event, suddenly you'll see an ad for it. And again, with social media, whatever you post, wherever you are, wherever you take a picture, the government has all of this information and you're giving it to them. So what exactly is going to be different with this Great Reset?
Well, that's 100% true. So I use social media. I'm guilty for giving big tech my information. It's a double-edged sword. I'm trying to not get cut too much by it. But yeah, so obviously we are tracked a lot by our phones. That's very well known. And many people are not okay with that. So they don't have social media, or they try, to not have their phones on them all the time, that type of thing. But it's like, why give the government more information? Because Dr. Naomi Wolf, she is the head of a big tech company in the States, and she's actually extremely left-wing. She's a Democrat. She used to be all involved with the Clinton Foundation, and she and other people are, calling to attention how dangerous vaccine passports are, because not only is your private medical information going to be public, and that will be necessary for you to show proof of vaccination to get into places. She said just with a slight tweak, it can have all your information uploaded to there. So it's going to be like the social credit system in China if it rolls out in other places in the world.
Well, these vaccine passports, you mentioned, a lot of people are worried about them as well. And I know I've seen that in the past, Peter Kent, who used to be a reporter when he was going to Vietnam, he also had a vaccine passport for certain shots that you had to get in order to travel there and to be safe. Now, what is the difference between that and these passports? I mean, everybody has vaccination records. Everybody already has a phone. What more could the government do to track us?
Well, now it's going to be digital. Like if it happens, it's going to be digital. And so that will be way easier. Way easier to be tracked through that. And also, it could be connected to your banking information and just say that you're not vaccinated for COVID-19, so you can't go to the grocery store. And then you won't be able to use your bank or different things like that. And I just want to say very clearly that I hate all this stuff. I cannot stand it. I hate thinking about it.
What stuff?
All of this COVID stuff, like, all the lockdown stuff, all this type of thing. I try not to think about it too, because it's part of, preservation, it's denial. I want to go back to before all the lockdowns, to normal life back last March when things were sane. And even Western's my university has been talking about ways that they could make the vaccine mandatory in order to go back to school. And there are many people who can't take the vaccine for various reasons or don't want to. So it's already being discussed, and it's hard for a lot of people to not think about it, because by the time it happens, it'll be almost too late to push back. And it's really unfortunate, because we shouldn't have to go through this. We shouldn't have to be able to, prove all this stuff just to exist in society and live and flourish.
Well, another conspiracy theory is that the vaccines are filled with something that will mutate our bodies or affect our bodies in a very particular way. Like there are a lot of theories swirling around what's in the vaccine. Now, Christina, you said you would take the vaccine. You still stand by that?
I've pre-registered.
Oh.
I'm in a hotspot. So my postal code actually. I could have been vaccinated over the weekend, but the pop-up that was in my neighborhood actually ran out of vaccines. But I am pre-registered for it. So the next time there is a pop-up of some sort, or once the mass vaccination clinic is open, I'm gonna go get vaccinated.
Well, yeah. Well, I too am in a hotspot. I mean, wherever I am, it's a hotspot. But anyway, Hannah, you said that you wouldn't take the vaccine. And why is that?
Well, I think it's unfortunate that we have to discuss these medical things in a public setting. It's like, how much more do people need to know about me? And I find people who can't wear masks has already been discriminated against. Now vaccines are another level. I just find it really awful. I would say for myself personally, I'm not comfortable taking a vaccine that has not been tested properly. And no vaccine has ever been created in less than 1 year. And there have been a lot of adverse reactions, blood clots, the AstraZeneca and Pfizer, I think now vaccine have been paused because of adverse reactions. And beyond that, I don't really care if someone takes a vaccine or not. That is their own right, and they should be able to take it or not take it. The issue is making it mandatory. That's just my main issue of making it mandatory. That is a breach of our human rights.
What would you say to people who do advocate for it to be mandatory because of herd immunity, for example, or one of the messages from the government is, and Ford keeps repeating this, that we all got to get vaccinated, and once that's done, then we'll be able to reopen. But at the rate that we're going to be closed for a decade. So what do you think about that?
They can go jump in a lake. They have no right to tell us that. This is the thing. Even the CDC is still saying, even when you're vaccinated, you're still going to have to wear a mask and you're still going to have to social distance until everybody is vaccinated. This will never end. And we're kidding ourselves to think it's going to end. The only way it's going to end is if we push back. So herd immunity can also be reached through people who already had COVID. Why do they have to get a vaccine? And there's also people testing positive for COVID after they've been vaccinated. And I have a family member who works in healthcare. The majority of the people in the facility have been vaccinated, who want to be vaccinated, and the staff members. And still they have to wear a face shield, wear a mask, and social distance. And it makes no sense because they've already been vaccinated and they were told once they could be vaccinated, you can go free now. And besides, that's a ridiculous human rights violation. Only in totalitarian regimes do they get to decide what we inject or don't inject in our body.
But with regards to vaccinations, even if you get the flu shot, you can still get the flu, right?
So yeah, there's no vaccine that can promise 100% immunity. All vaccines are a preventative measure and are, for the most part, effective, but
then why are we treating it as a magic bullet, though, as a magic
because
pill?
if something offers you a 90% chance of not getting COVID, people are that like, for me, I would rather have a 90% chance of not getting COVID than 100
than getting it.
We're told now that it doesn't prevent you from getting it or spreading it, but it just will help your immune system to work better so that you don't end up in a hospital and you're at less risk from dying. So there's a 99% survival rate from COVID-19 itself.
So two things. One, we have a comment from Matt, which said that the chances of blood clots in AstraZeneca are far less than some forms of oral contraception.
And some forms of food, he said also after
yeah.
that. Which I was going to bring that comment up. I think that's a good point, that the issue with blood clots has not been, it's not like something that's happening to a lot of patients. It's out of like 1 million, there were however many patients, and it's actually been proven that some of those people who had blood clots were already predisposed to it, or they already had blood clots or a condition that caused blood clots. So it just happened, the vaccine, I guess you could call it a coincidence, but it is true. There's a lot of things that cause blood clots, like I'm less worried about that. I've been taking the oral contraception pill for like almost a decade now. So
I mean, we got to say, if one life is worth saving, so we shouldn't want anybody to die from the vaccine. We should make sure we don't vaccinate anybody so they don't die from the adverse reactions. I mean, you can use that argument that way, because we're told that we have to shut down forever, so not one person dies from COVID. That argument can be used either way. So
well,
I just don't add that.
I was just going to say that, like, you managed to show both sides of it, because I was going to say that the same argument can be used for lockdown. So how do you differentiate, though, the COVID vaccine versus, let's say, chicken pox or other vaccines that you get as a child that are, to a degree, mandatory, or at least socially advocated for? Like in many schools, they say, show us your vaccination records. If you don't have this vaccine, you can't go to school.
I think to go back to what Hannah was saying before, that this is a vaccine that, hasn't gone through the same process as other vaccines, which I acknowledge. I understand it was made a lot faster. It might have been tested more, faster as well. But so I can see the hesitancy there around that vaccine. Chickenpox, all those vaccines that we were getting as kids are things that have been around for a long time, and they've been tested. I think that does make a difference. People probably would prefer to get a vaccine like that than one that was developed in under a year. So,
well, a lot of scientists have said that the reason the vaccine has come to fruition so quickly is just because of the nature of the situation. There was less bureaucracy involved, and the science was able to be, all the testing was able to be done faster, and so forth. But taking a look at polio, for example, there was a whole polio crisis, and a vaccine was developed, and people were taking the vaccine, and they managed to eradicate polio.
Yeah, now there's no polio.
So who's to say that this vaccine won't do the same thing?
Well, I don't know if polio is a virus or how that works, but I know, like, for coronaviruses, they mutate incessantly, and we have 1 million variants of it, and many people act like they didn't know biology 101, that viruses mutate. Wow. But so, I mean, imagine if we kept track of all the other viruses that are, just regular flu or cold viruses and all that type of stuff. Imagine if we kept track of them like that, and we could say we have to be locked down forever so no one dies from those things as well. But I agree with, Christina, that 100% all those other vaccines, whether you agree with them or not, have went through extensive testing. And there are multiple doctors here in Canada and abroad who are saying that they have huge issues with this because it hasn't been tested on children. And now, our education minister is saying we got to vaccinate all the kids. It's not been tested on them. And even for adults, the trial periods were short. They were condensed. They were overlapping, that type of stuff. And there are a lot of concerns in that regard. And also because the vaccine companies have zero immunity. You can't, who are you going to sue if you have a reaction? You certainly can't sue them. And that's a huge concern.
So would you take a vaccine? Oh, sorry, you wanted to...
Oh, I was just going to read. There was a comment
from Kobe.
Yes, where did it go? Oh, he just said polio is a virus, but
that's the one, I think.
No,
just the polio being a virus.
Oh, that's all he said. He just said polio is a virus.
Just in regards to
okay.
Yeah. So, and I was going to add to that there's a lot of things that have been eradicated through vaccines, a lot of viruses. So measles, polio, chicken pox is not eradicated, but it's a very effective vaccine. It's either, my sister's never gotten chicken pox. She just gets the vaccine to prevent it from happening because the older you get, the riskier it is.
And there's a virus when
you
people
get it's shingles.
Shingles, right.
Yeah.
So in regards to the vaccine, would you be open to taking the vaccine in a year or two? after you see the long-term effects on people, if there's no negative long-term effects? Would that change your mind?
No, I would say because it's my body, my choice, so I don't have to if I don't want to. And second of all, I am not like at risk for dying from COVID, so why should I take a vaccine that I could have adverse reactions to?
But if your grievances were with the fact that they were rushed, the research and the development was rushed, if you do see the long-term long-term effects and they're not negative, let's say, you still wouldn't take a vaccine?
No, I have no interest in taking it, no.
Have you gotten the other vaccines regarding polio, chickenpox? Did you get those?
That's my private medical information.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's what we're here to debate, but fair enough. This takes us to the future, though. And in regards to conspiracy theories, how do you talk to people who are spreading potentially false information, right? And convince them to stop?
Can I read one more comment?
Yeah.
Kobe said, "Your right of not wanting the vaccine," well, he said it, "your right of not wanting it should not give you the right to spread it."
Say that again.
Your right of not wanting it, being the vaccine, should not give you the right to spread it.
I mean, people can spread anything, and if you're sick, stay home. So, and health is an individual responsibility. It's not a collective responsibility. And if we think of it as a collective responsibility, where we're moving that to that definitively, we're going to live in, these sanitized zones where we can't go anywhere, we can't do anything because you might, kill someone. I mean, if we're going to continue down that route, we shouldn't be driving then because we might kill someone as well. So we cannot value safety over everything else and over human rights and over individual responsibility. That's a huge part, and people should not be coerced into doing things that they don't agree with.
And that is a fair point. And before COVID, nobody wore masks.
We're developing in a germaphobe culture. It's a very, very harmful thing. There are going to be kids who are permanently traumatized from this. They don't want to leave their home because they might catch something. I have one of my students. She's like, "Oh, Hannah, I don't want to die from the disease," and she hasn't left her home for ages. Like, that's a very harmful thing. Like, people are going to be afraid of just being in regular context because they might get sick, not really realizing that most of them will be fine and they'll be able to survive it. And we have to develop our immune system. Our immune system is not in a mask; it's inside of our body. We have an immune system for a reason. And if we live in a bubble forever, we'll have terrible immune systems and we will not be able to fight things properly.
So taking us back to how do we stop people from spreading false information, how do we do that? Because once again, so much that is said to be false could actually be true, but a lot of it is false. Like, not only do you have to decipher, but let's say something is unequivocally false. How do you convince someone and tell them to stop spreading it? Christina?
I don't know. I mean, like, you can only...
Do you think banning them from Facebook and social media platforms is the way?
I mean, I feel like that just gives them more publicity. It's not like they're...
It's a Streisand effect.
They're not... like, Trump getting banned on Twitter was actually probably good for his fan base. That was like that was something that fueled them even more. So, I mean... I really don't know
how to stop it. Hannah?
Challenge people, debate people, have open discussions. I mean, context like this is amazing for people who have different viewpoints to come together and to be able to not get offended, have a thick skin, and be able to still be friends, hopefully, and debate and challenge each other and learn what the truth is. You have to learn what the truth is, be presented which is not the truth, instead of censoring it, because that's going to make people more attracted to things that may be false. And we're adults. We should be able to decide for ourselves what is or is not true.
Yeah, to add to that, I think majority of my friends are actually against getting the vaccine.
Really?
Yes, like the bulk of my very close friend group.
For the same reasons as Hannah?
Yeah, so some of the reasons, some of them upbringing, being raised in a household that was either anti-vax or hesitant of vaccines. So surprisingly, like, I'm kind of the odd one out in my very close friend group. So it's much more common than we realize. A lot of people don't want to get it.
So what will conspiracy theories look like in, let's say, 10 to 20 years? So going with the idea that we're going to be tracked more if these vaccine passports go ahead, and the internet becomes even more accessible and they get more information, what will conspiracy theories look like?
I have no idea. I'm definitely hoping that there's going to be more independent news sources, more independent social media sources, that we won't only be stuck to these certain servers that Amazon can shut down, or, Google can shut down and stuff like that. I'm hoping that maybe Elon Musk will create, his own phone or that type of stuff. I'm all for companies growing and prospering and stuff like that. But, this big tech, monopoly that's going on is not helpful. We need more independent sources, and we need more people who think for themselves to speak up. And like I just said, going back to the, debating, challenging things, not the more you push something down, the more radicalized it's going to be. And you're not going to be able to change people's mind if you shun them outside of society and you ostracize them. It's only going to cement them more in their beliefs, whether their beliefs are right or wrong. But it's going to create a polarized society where people are hateful of each other and we're not able to have rational discussions. It's going to radicalize people of all sides, because often we think that conspiracy theories is like a right-wing thing. There are lots of left-wing conspiracy theories
sure.
their and some people are genuinely what I would call nut jobs. Some people are absolutely not, and we should never lump people in all the same camp, and we should challenge and respectfully debate everybody.
How do you differentiate who's a nut job, though?
Well, whether what they believe lines up with reality and lines up with facts, whether it's logical.
A lot of people would say that vaccine passports, thinking that they're going to track us, it's not true.
Well, just read Klaus Schwab's books. So, and look at what's happening. New York has rolled out their vaccine passports. I heard in Hawaii they're doing it now, and I know in South America there's a volcano happening, and the president of the island, I forget the island, he said the only people who are vaccinated will be able to go on the ship to be rescued off the island.
St. Vincent, I believe. Yeah.
Wait, so if you're not vaccinated, you're just left?
Yeah, you're left there. Oh. Yes, and so throughout history, people who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And all throughout history, there have been times where people were deemed lesser or they were deemed unclean, and we've seen the terrible human rights abuses that have happened as a result of that. So I think we're going to have we are having a lot more harm happen than good through this.
Christina, have you figured out how you would stop or what conspiracy theories are going to look like in 10, 20 years?
No. But I do agree with Hannah that we shouldn't suppress these ideas, unless it's actually causing some kind of serious damage. We should let people speak and debate and have conversation. You shouldn't be ostracized for saying something that maybe other people don't believe. Isn't that the whole point of free speech? The whole point is people can say whatever they'd like. You're allowed. And the other side of it is that if you don't agree with what these people are saying, your right to free speech gives you the right to debate it. So I think we need to let people talk. People need to be allowed. We can't force people to only believe one thing and to only, that if they don't follow exactly what everybody else believes, that they're wrong and we should shun them, because that's not where do we get by doing that? Isn't the whole point of debate and free speech is that you have to hear the other side. One thing would be if I hear somebody spewing a crazy conspiracy theory online, that just validates my beliefs even more. So why not let them speak? That's how we develop as human beings. So you have to let people speak, and I don't think there's any reason to suppress it. So I think conspiracy theories will continue, and we shouldn't be shunning people for
believing them.
And you know what? If they're wrong, they're wrong. It doesn't hurt. If it's not hurting anybody, then.
And it's fascinating how so often the people who claim to be inclusive are the ones who are most in favor of cancel culture. So we have to be respectful of people's differing viewpoints and challenge and discuss and debate. And that's how we advance as a society. That's how we learn and grow, because there are many things that people thought in the past were right and they end up being wrong. And so there are many things that we believe nowadays that are probably wrong. And we need to be able to advance and learn as technology and science develop instead of going backwards.
And that takes us back, both of what you said, it takes us back to what I said in the beginning of the show, that people who are not willing to debate these ideas are not helping anyone. So that's where we're going to end the show for today. Thank you to everyone that tuned in and that messaged us live. We had a lot of comments. This was clearly a very big topic and very controversial, I should say, issue for a lot of people, and we appreciate you tuning in and commenting. Hannah, thank you so much for coming back on the show. We really appreciate it. You had a long drive to get here.
I love it. I love spaces like this to have freedom of speech and expression. It should be this way everywhere. So it's a treat and it's an honor. And thank you for providing the space. And thank you, Christina, for being able to, we can challenge and debate each other. It's awesome.
Of course. Yeah. I think I like to be able to be the one left person who doesn't, who is in the room and doesn't suck and, just completely, because that's one thing that, my party likes to do, or my side likes to do, like to villainize conservatives and people who don't think the way that we think. And I think that's wrong because we don't get anywhere with that. So anytime I like these kinds of conversations, and I don't even disagree with everything you say. So.
And that's exactly why, you're on the show. You're one of the people that is for these discussions, that appreciates them, that fights to have them. So, of course, it's been a pleasure as always, Christina.
Thank you. Shout out to Anna. We miss her.
Yes. Anna will be back on the show next week, hopefully, if her COVID results are negative. Otherwise, somebody might have to fill in that chair. We don't know who, but we are hoping for Anna to have a quick and swift return. Once again, that was our show for this week. A brand new episode of the Raben Report will be coming to you next week, same day, same time, almost the same people. Have a good night, everyone.